I promise I won't. Thank you, Ray. Let me get my big book out. I can read my book. I won't cover. Hi. I am nervous as a virgin. I wonder why you all laugh. Could it be that you understand that statement? Okay. Well, tonight we are on the fourth step. I was saying to my dear friend Ed how blessed I felt all week. And I know why. I was sharing with Andy because Andy's doing the steps, and I was talking about how it feels when you start to prepare for doing the steps or sharing on the steps. And if you do it the way it's suggested, you have to go into the literature, and you go, and then you get a thought, and you take that thought to the book, and then the book leads you to another part of the book, and you keep going around. And it's just, and what it does for me, it just brings up a lot of stuff that needs to be addressed as I think about how it relates to the step I'm on, and also what to do with it. But more importantly, what it does for me, it brings me closer to my higher power. And that is something I can't get enough of. And it allows me also to be disciplined. I don't know about you, I'm an alcoholic that is still undisciplined in certain areas. And I have to tell you, when doing this kind of work, it allows me to be disciplined. Set aside a couple of hours each week, even though I would like to practice what I want to do. This allows me to be disciplined. So I am very, very, very grateful to be asked to speak at this meeting. I just told Ed to please let the committee know how blessed I am and grateful for the opportunity. When I did first step one, I didn't feel this way. It takes a while for me to get into it, so I'm grateful to be here. I will introduce myself the way I was taught to do so. And I am an alcoholic, just like Ray introduced himself. I was taught that way. I'm an alcoholic first and foremost. I have a home group, and my home group is the One Day at a Time group of Alcoholics Anonymous. My home group is located at Miramar Parkway and University Drive. My home group meets every Wednesday at 8 p.m. And if you should ever find yourself up in that neck of that woods on a Wednesday night and need a meeting, please drop by. We would love to have you. I sponsor and I'm sponsored. And to me, that's the difference between work and working. And I have a sober date. My sober date is January 28, 1995. And my name is Paulette. Hi, family. Thank you so much. There's so much to talk about with the fourth step inventory that our program of action laid out. It's a lot to talk about. And what I'm going to try to do tonight, I'll see what God says, is try to lead in from the third step part of the third step into 4 to get us on our way. And I will try to do the same thing next week with 4 into 5, because it seems to flow that way when I practice it. So I'm going to try to see what God says. Because when I open my mouth, it's God who speaks. That's what I know today. And if you're here tonight and you haven't got a higher power as yet, please do not be discouraged. Keep an open mind and just to take in what I have to share, because this is my experience based on our literature and the program of action based on our big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. This is mine. Every alcoholic who wants or plans to live this way of life should have one. And as I often say, don't tell me you don't have any money. That's not true. Alcoholics are resourceful. So I suggest you get one. And that's what I plan to do. We'll see what God says. So we're going to start tonight on step 4. And what do I do every time I start a step? Read it as it's written. Because I tend to want to put words into the step to make it sound better. It sounds better, you're better able to understand it. That's what I tell myself. That's the lie I tell myself. That's the insanity, because remember, the insanity I suffer from is a form of lie and delusions. I tell myself a lot of those things that kept me sick for a very long time. And even in recovery, I still practice that. Because remember, I wasn't rendered white as snow. This is a way of life for as long as I live. It's a lifetime practice for me. And so I read the step every time I'm asked to share about the steps. I always read it as it's written. It makes a difference. It keeps me on point, limits and boundaries. Something alcoholics have no idea what to do with. So step 4 says, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. That's step 4. Very big task for us, but it's not a fearful one. To me, step 3 was the most biggest and continue to be, because I have to do that every day. So I'm going to start with, first of all, for me, step 4 is removing the blockage that stopped me from receiving God of my understanding help. That's what step 4 really boils down for me. There are things that blocks me from the God of my understanding, what I call His grace. That's how I look at step 4. And so it really is about finding those things that blocks Paulette. If I'm irritable, discontented, and ill at ease, there's something bothering me. There's something blocking me from receiving that grace that would make me comfortable in my own skin. That's step 4 to me. So that's what it really is about. And a personal inventory, really, if you think about it, what is the business we are in as alcoholic? I'm in the business of staying sober. That's really the business I have. And so one of the things that I have to think about when I don't want to do something to help myself, because I need to take action. Because one of the things about step 3 is it's affirmative action. It means I'm getting ready to do some things. I make a decision and then I'm going to take action. So it's about doing some things. So I no longer have the luxury of coming to meeting and sitting in a chair and just taking what everybody has offered. At this juncture of my recovery, it's about doing some things. And I know we stay lazy and we procrastinate. And we tell ourselves the lie that everything is okay. Because at this juncture, some of us have gotten family back. We have jobs that are paying us a lot of money that we didn't think we could ever make again. We're driving fancy cars. We have great homes. Some of us have wonderful relationships. Even though it might be on the skid, it's still a relationship. You know, where some of us are sponsoring people. Some of us are doing service at our home groups. Some of us have home groups. We have a life today. So we tend to tell ourselves everything is okay. I don't need to move forward. If you're an alcoholic like me, it happened to me. I got all of those things back. Thank God the husband that I had didn't decide to dump me when he took me to my first AA meeting. So all was well with me, and I sat in AA meeting and I took everything that you guys gave me, and I never thought about giving back. I am a taker. What makes me a taker? And so at this juncture, what happened is I kept taking, and because I have a bottomless pit, an insatiable desire that no amount of human aid can fill, it went nowhere fast. And I hit a bottom, and that's where I hit my emotional bankruptcy. In recovery, it happens, because I am a testimony that this happened. Thank God for wonderful AA friends who were there for me when I reached out, because I would not have been here if they weren't there for me. So I know what doing this work means. And I'm going to read you something from the big book to let you know that this happens from the day Bill Wilson came into AA, because he wrote about it. And I'm going to find it, right here. I want to talk about him. It's on page 35, where he suffered from this, what I just talked about. Our first example is a friend we shall call Jim. This man has a charming wife and a family. He inherited a lucrative automobile agency. He had a commendable World War record. He is a good salesman. Everybody likes him. He is an intelligent man, normal as far as we can see, except for a nervous disposition. He did no drinking until he was 35 years old. In a few years, he became so violent when intoxicated that he had to be committed. On leaving the asylum, he came in contact with us. We told him we knew about alcoholism, which is what you did for me when I got here. And the answer you found. He made a beginning, which is what I did. Step 1, I'm powerless. My life was unmanageable. I'm powerless over the disease I have called alcoholism. Step 2, I have to find a power because I lack the power. I am insane. My insanity lives in my thinking. And when I think it, I act upon it. But the power that I am supposed to find in 2 tells me if I find that power will restore me to sanity. So I got that. So I'm running on 1 and 2. When I got to 3, I did what he did. I said the words. He says, he made a beginning. His family was reassembled. Me. Ellen Akeem took me back in open arms. I was wonderful for them. I couldn't do no wrong. And he began to work as a salesman for the business he had lost through drinking. I got back my first job at 90 days sober. I couldn't understand how that happened after I walked off that job without giving notice. Never called. And the same supervisor I had called me at 90 days sober and offered me a job without even asking me about the past. Tell me about your miracles, God's grace. But I thought being sober was okay, and that's what gave me the job. Little did I know. All went well for a while. That was me. And here comes the killer. But he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. What the heck does that mean? It means, step 62, page 62. Selfishness and self-centeredness. That we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear and self-delusions, self-seeking and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. The other paragraph I'm going to skip around. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. You don't think so? Stick with me. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot. My God. Above everything else, all alcoholics must be rid of selfishness. We must, or it kills us, exclamation point. God makes that possible. There are often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Now, we have to have God help. Bottom of 62. Here are the steps to get into fourth. This is the how and why of it. How many times have we read this at meetings? Have you ever stopped and pondered? Or you raced through it? First of all, we had to quit playing God. That was the best job I ever had. And when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous and I sat on my laurels, thought that I had accomplished something, I was still playing God because my will was not aligned with the God of my understanding will. And the reason why I start there is because without that, you cannot do an honest appraisal of the things that block you from your higher power. This has been my experience and continue to be my experience. And he says, it didn't work. How many times have you told yourself you want to get something done by if this person will just do what I say exactly? And by the time you finish giving out your directives, the person mess up. Causes you a lot of problems. Money, standing, and all you can say is, if you had just listened to what I had to say. Not thinking you have no power over human beings. Always thinking that you have. That's the kind of lie I tell myself. That's the insanity that step 2 is talking about. See how it plays out? Even without a drink. Wait till I tell you about what I did recently. You won't believe it, and I'm 23 years sober. Some of us will believe it. Next, we decided in the year after, which means moving on, future. This is how this program is wonderful, because even when it's telling us that we got to do some painful stuff, it's still giving us promises. And then it says, that hereafter in this drama of life. So my life is a drama. Little did I know all the time that I was being dramatic, I was really playing a part in my life. It just wasn't successful at it. I sucked as an actor. You know, I wasn't getting an Oscar. God was going to be our director. Big decision. Big. Key for step 4 inventory. He is the principal. I am his agent. Meaning I'm working now for something bigger than me. Big, key. This is the theme we must carry towards forth. He is the Father, and we are his children. Most good ideas, notice the word good. When have you ever had a good idea? Think about it. Most good ideas are simple. Listen, when have we ever had a good idea that is simple? Think about it. Just take a moment and just pause. Good idea, simple. Alcoholic. Right? This is the promise. Promise is promising. This is promising us now. And this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch to which we pass to freedom. The keystone, a wedge-shaped piece at the crown of an arch, which hold all the pieces together. That's the kind of power that this promises us. Everything comes together and hold together, right? This is what happens when we take such a position. All sorts of remarkable things happen. And I'm going to stop there for a minute, because now we're going to go into the personal inventory. Because if you have that kind of God, or even something close to it, those things, you have to have that God direct your life, because you are now going to look at your life as you have never seen it before. This isn't for babies. This is for grown-ups. What we're about to embark upon for the first time in most of our lives is something that we have never ever want to do. It talks about it in the 12 and 12. So fear says you dare not look. Have you ever looked at yourself in a mirror? I duck when I used to drink. I would just shoot past my own mirror. Now I pay rent, and I can't even look at the mirror that's in the bathroom because I'm afraid to see what looks back at me, the reflection. But I now have an opportunity to take a look at Paulette. And I'm going to tell you about this part that I found recently. I was sharing that at my home group. There is a thing called the quality of willingness. It's in the 12 and 12. What does that mean? The quality of willingness that needs to be used when we're doing the fourth step, at least by my experience, is honesty, number one, sincerity, number two, a desire that is it's overwhelming to push forward through whatever I find. Must be able to do this. It's the quality of my willingness that's going to allow me with the God that is my director and help me to lay it out. Now, fourth step is not about the columns. They are necessary for us to be in order, but it really isn't about the column. It is about taking a look at the kind of person I had become by my instincts that have gone awry. I need to see what I have done with my God-given instincts that are out of whack. And how do they come from? What way are they manifested in? 100 forms of fear. That's what the big book says, and I believe it because I'm living proof. I was all fear-based when I got here. But my fear had to be broken down in ways so I could see it better. Practical ways. So my fear is one of the things I'm going to have to look at in my personal inventory. So the columns are important, but it's not about the columns. It's about organizing the 100 forms of fear. And the only way I could see it, by what the big book says, is by the relationships that I've had all these years. Because that's where all of my whacked out instincts play out. And I can't remember all of them because, see, I've had a resentment for somebody for almost 20 years. One resentment, and every time I press the play button on my recorder, the same resentment plays over and over and over, and the person's died and I didn't even know. That's what my alcohol thinking is. That's the kind of behavior I do. So it says laid out, the forms of fear. Now the big book talks about this in a way, because now you have to practice. Remember, belief developed in two? Now you have to use the faith. Faith is practicing on that belief that you have just experienced. All you have to do is look around you tonight, and you can see what this is belief. That every man and woman that sits here tonight that stays sober, that is a belief system operating. Now you have to take that and run on that. Use it to build on faith, a trust in a power greater than yourself that you have decided is going to manage your life. How am I going to let this power come in on a daily basis when I have all this junk inside of me? I'm being blocked. So Bill says we need to identify them. And there's certain categories they all fall into. Resentment is the number one offender. It says that in the big book. The other one is fear. Resentment and anger goes together for me. They're lockstep in arms. I get a resentment, the next thing you know, I'm in rage. How did I get from 0 to 3? resentment started. And I don't necessarily know when, because I'm not paying attention. I just know it triggers something. Resentment and anger, fear, guilt, remorse, self-pity. All of those things are unpleasant companion for me. Those are things that help me to stay sick, block. And so Bill is saying if you want to remove them, you got to lay them out by the relationships you're in. And when they told me that, thank God I was married when I got to AA, they said, and I thought I should divorce Ed. And my sponsor said, no, stay with him, because he will show you all of your character defects. And God, was he right. You cannot be by yourself and get to know you without being in a relationship. That's been my experience. Even when you come to the meetings, if you notice, the people that you hung around with, you get to know a little bit about yourself by the interactions you have with them. They show you who you are. Some of the things you don't want to hear, you didn't solicit, but you get it anyway. Because it's Alcoholics Anonymous. Everybody takes everybody's inventory but their own. And one of the things it teaches us to do is what he says. He says put the columns down, but you have to focus on one column at a time. Why? Because we are undisciplined. We are all over the place. We start doing one thing, we go to the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, and by the time the day is done, you have accomplished nothing. Who have had that before? I can't seem to find the head-hearted tail of this donkey. That's why you have to list one column first. Who am I resentful at? List it all the way down. Same thing for fear. All the way down, one column at a time. Sometimes if you're doing a fourth step for the first time, folks, you may have a lot of people that you're resentful at. But I'll give you a secret. You will figure out by the time you keep living this program and following it as it's written out, 3/4 of those people on that first column doesn't exist. All made up. That's how dangerous this disease is. Years of telling myself a lie. But let's stick to how we need to do this and why. One of the things that I always thought about is, I'm going to tell you about I'm 23 years sober. This is why I tell you, if you think you have nothing to do on yourself, you'll finish working, stick around. Because as long as you're sober, as we are, and you engage in the world at large, you will find a lot of yourself coming to. There are places about me or things about me I have yet to find out. Recently, I live in a wonderful community. I love my neighborhood. I never thought that an alcoholic like me could find some place that would please me. I can't find anything wrong with the place. And I'm an alcoholic that looks for something is wrong, so I could focus on it. Thank God I'm not at that place. But recently, my neighbor that I love so much moved out because of his wife's health and moved into a condo where he doesn't have to do a lot of the work on the house and she doesn't have to deal with stairs. And it was for the right reason. He wasn't selfish like I am. And so the person who bought the house has 2 kids under the age of 5. My son is 34 years old. I have 1 child. He lives in New York City. I don't see him often, but we talk often. I love him dearly and he loves me dearly too. But distance from each other is good. Not in a bad way. Not in a bad way. It helps me to grow better, and also it helps him with his independence, because he's an only child. So I have no recollection of what a child is at 5 years old anymore. That thought have left me, and nor am I running it back. Selfishness, self-centeredness. So my neighbor moves in with his wife and his 2 kids, and he's fixing his house. No problem there. What caused me to get a resentment against him was that my husband, Ed, and they became friends. So I have no problem with that until he starts to tell Ed what I should do with my landscape so that I can increase the value of my home. And then my husband, thinking it's a good idea, repeated it to me. So I took it in. I processed. Never once did I stop to say, okay, God, what is this all about? I left God in the garden. I'm sober 23 years, I can handle this. So I said to him, oh, that's very nice of him to see where we can increase the value of our home. But right there, I tell you this with all honesty, the quality of my willingness, with all honesty, right there, the resentment started to fester. How do I know? I used to come out of my house and say good morning to him. I come out of my house in the morning and he's out in his driveway, and I have to think and count to 10 before I say good morning, because I don't want to talk to him. Who does he think he is? Who died and left him in charge of the community? We were doing just fine before he moved here. Do you understand what I'm saying, people? I am 23 years sober. I have a God that it isn't you, that I actually talk to every day, sometimes 3 times a day. I have a program of action that I truly believe with all the passion in my heart. But here I've got to tell you, my alcoholic mind says it's time to teach him a lesson. So I plot. And I plot in the way insanity of my disease work. I plot without telling myself I'm plotting. Can you identify with that? So all of a sudden, this dude is the worst thing that moves in the neighborhood. How do I convince my husband he is? Because Ed likes him. You got to get people on his side. You understand what I'm saying? This is what Bill is talking about, why you have to set it on paper. You must write these things out. You cannot do a footstep in your mind. You will think yourself out of it. And I sat there, and then he actually said something nice to me one day. How do you respond to that when you are plotting this man's demise? That's how God works for me. Because once you are spiritually awoken, or you're awake, you are aware of your behavior. You are aware of the thoughts that comes and how you act upon that thought. At least I am. You cannot unring that bell. Now I'm starting to become irritable, discontented, and ill at ease. So the nature of my resentment is a deadly one. Because as simple as I tell you about my neighbor, it can get to the point where I can start plotting and bringing other members of the community into that. You understand? I do not put anything above my disease. I am capable of doing these things because he shouldn't have passed a remark about my landscape. How stupid is that? And that's the nature of my resentment. Some of my fears are real, but some aren't. And I have to tell you this because I found them out when I put them in the column with the relationships that I have had trouble with over the years and held on to. And what it says, I need to look at what it affects. What did this man affect, my neighbor? My standing in the community. I pride myself of being a productive member of my community. I am sober after all. Don't you understand who I am? I go to work. I keep my yard clean. I cut my grass every 3 weeks. The paint on my house is not peeling. I need new windows, but the old windows look fine. I have a good home. So he affects my self-esteem. Do you understand? That's where my mind goes. So I had to look at that. And I'm giving you that. Now, what if I had taken his constructive feedback? And I'm telling you this because you know what? For me, I found out the words I use makes a difference. What comes out of my mouth makes a difference in how I perceive whether you are causing me harm or I am about to cause you harm. If I had looked at what he said to Ed as constructive feedback, it would have been a different thing. Because I would have taken that and maybe we could have started a chain connection. Because you touch one, just like AA, one person touch another with the message and the other person touch another with the message, and before you know it, you've got a room full of sober people. Well, that's the way my relationship with people can work if I don't perceive it as a negative. That's what Paulette Step does for me. When I see how my behavior, how did I perceive it? I took it negatively. So I took it, it affected my self-esteem. My relationship with him was nil now, and it also started to affect my relationship with my husband. Because every time he mentions his name, I clam up. And I'm saying to myself, now he's your best friend? I'll show you. You know? And this is what the Paulette Step is saying. So when we do things like that, as simple as that, we have serious other stuff, but that's the premise. It must be written down, people. Do not fool yourself that your alcoholic mind is capable of doing this inventory in your mind. It is going to tell you that. Don't buy it. It's a delusion, a form of insanity. And so, if I am going to do this as it says, if I'm resentful at my neighbor, notice I didn't even tell you his name. Because the minute he criticized me, his name ceased to exist. Yeah. The cause and the effect. Now, when they talk about, we got time. The personal inventory. The personal inventory, Bill implies here that there should be another column apart from the fourth, a fifth column, the forgiveness column. Why? Because if you do it the way it's laid out, you will find where you have been wrong. And most of us, when we find that out, because I fall prey to that. Most of us, when we find out the part we play in this resentment, we let it go and concentrate on the person that we harmed. But we forget to forgive ourselves of doing or engaging in that behavior. So one of the things that is really implied if you follow the big book, Paulette Step laid out, it's beautiful if you follow it and take some time, because this is not an overnight matter. It is a step for life. You will constantly, and it will go right back, because when you continue to read the big book, Bill often say, refer to your list. You need to go back and see these character defects, these personality flaws, these chink in our ego, these selfish and self-centered behavior that we act upon, how they warped our relationships. Every day, if you are honest and sincere, you will see it when you start to look at you. And what happened is, he's saying here, it's all about the flawed thinking. Right there is in our thinking. How I perceive someone talking to me is totally flawed. they talk about it, my perception is distorted. And alcoholic is an extreme example. So I can't trust myself to do an inventory and not share it with somebody else. We'll talk about that more in 5. Because I am apt to try to see myself or my behavior in good light. Because I could blame this dude for criticizing my lawn and start the ball a-rolling. And sure enough, I would find good argument and good grounds to stand on. So step 4 is saying that we need to also forgive ourselves. So I had to go to that. I had to go there. I didn't like the fact that I come out of my house every morning. I'm a morning person. I love the mornings. For somebody who couldn't stand mornings when I got here, I live for the mornings. And now it's dark. So I have this self-centered feeling that God is alone with me and the rest of you have just got to wait. I just love the morning. But he's out there too, early morning, my neighbor. How dare he? And I can't get away from this man. So I become more uncomfortable with the thoughts. And I'm acting up on it unconsciously because I don't want to say good morning, so I'm grunting. Barely. And one of the things I've learned about doing more than one footstep over and over, now I do 10. I understand what it does to me, and I don't like it, folks. I don't like to feel uncomfortable in my own skin. I know what joy feels like in my heart. I know the relationship I have with the God of my understanding that I talk to every day. I know the relationship I have with you. I want to be able to look you in the eye and be sincere about what I say to you and be honest. When I do and act upon that kind of behavior, it takes away from every little relationship I have. It eats away at it. And it may not seem like a big thing at once. But little by little, sure enough, there will come a day where every relationship that I have had because of that one resentment has been tainted. And the only reason why I know it was because I did a sincere attempt at an honest appraisal of taking stock of what I came to AA with. With the help of God as my understanding, was able to sit with a loving sponsor and do this line by line. First, write down every relationship that I could think of. Start today. Because Alcoholics Anonymous told me I live today. And it took me that to see that. So I had to forgive myself, first of all, to feel the way that I felt about that man. Had to. I couldn't go forward. Paulette, you're human. And in the step, when he talks about, there's some prayers in the 4th step that we must get used to. And one of them is the forgiveness prayer. And it talks about it here when it says on page 67, though we did not like their symptoms, the way they disturb us, they, like us, ourselves, were sick too. We ask God to help us to show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we could cheerfully grant a sick friend. It's the same thing I ask for myself too, in the forgiveness. When a person offends, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will, not mine, be done. That's the step 4 prayer for forgiveness. There's one for sex. There's one for fear. That's how chock full of work is in this book. So if you haven't started doing your 4th step yet, do not be discouraged. But don't keep warming a chair in every AA meeting, thinking it's going to write itself for you. Start. Because you are stopping, you're the only person that is blocking the rest of your life to be a quality, healthy, and sober one. Because if I'm standing here and I'm telling you that I am not afraid of taking a look at Paulette, you too can say the same thing. Start looking at your relationship. Start get used to writing. And start doing this work. Because I didn't even touch up on a lot of things, but next week we will get into it. But now you understand that the fourth step is not about the column. It's about removing, identifying the blockage of your instincts that have gone awry out of you, so you can ask your higher power to help you remove it. And in the process, start to develop as a healthy human being, a productive one. It's the beginning of a lifetime process, and it never stops until the day we die. Thank you so much for your generosity.